Hi, so we're here with the Morning Star MC6 foot controller. I have it hooked up to an Xfx Tuner Mark II at the moment. I have two Roland EV5s plugged into the two expression inputs. It connects it via standard 5-pin MIDI cables and can be powered a multiple number of ways. Currently I have it powered by a standard Type B USB cable, just the square barrel kind. It can also be powered by the barrel plug 9-volt power supply, so if you have like a 1-spot or something. And can also be powered via phantom power with MIDI, so very handy having all those options. I especially like being able to use a USB cable because I don't need to have some specialty device, and I have tons of USB cables laying around, so that's a nice feature. So there are 6 buttons labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and there are 30 banks of options. So right off the bat we have 30 times 6 different things we can program this for. So right now I am on my first bank, and I have scenes 1 through 4, tap tempo and tuner set up. So if I hit the tuner, there's the Xfx Tuner, and my guitar is thankfully in tune, almost. There we go. Hit exit. Tap tempo is self-explanatory. You just hit it, set the tempo. So right now I have, we're on here. Cool. So we have scene 1. I have a patch with a clean Fender deluxe reverb, clean with some delay, drive added, back to clean but with a more rhythmic delay, and a different lead amp sound. So now to scroll between banks, to go right, hit B and C together, and left A and B together. So bank 2, some effects, which blink when they're on, don't blink when they're off. It doesn't always sync perfectly well with the patch, but generally it works okay. It's a little glitchy, but other than the MFC, I've yet to use a foot pedal that perfectly syncs with the Xfx. Looper mode. Oops. There we go. And some more scenes and patches. So to program this, there's a lot of button pressing, so I've made a little post-it note list of what does what. Currently I'm using the 2.5 beta firmware, which just added a few cool new features that have been quite helpful. So to edit, first of all, a bank, so all 6 of these together, you hit B and F together. So we have the bank name, and you can also copy and paste this to other banks. So if I hit F up here to copy, then I can scroll over to another bank and just paste the whole thing down. So that's kind of cool, kind of like in the Xfx where you'd have, several different patches, and you might, duplicate a few of them in a row. So maybe with this gig you need to have, patch A, B, and C right next to each other, but on another gig it might be A, B, and F need to be right next to each other. So you can copy and paste in different orders, which is quite nice. And then hit this to edit the bank name. So moves left and right, and then this scrolls up and down through characters. Now to exit with saving, I forget this, there we go, saves and exits, and that just exits. So D and E, save and exit, D and F, exits. You can look this up online to get the user manual for which does what, but exit one more time. Okay, now I'm back to this. So to edit an individual button, you have to first press the button. So I'm going to edit A, and then to edit the switch, I'm going to do D and F together. So here we can program what it does, the message. You can clear it if you want. Again, copy and paste, another very useful feature. Edit the name and the full name. So the difference between the two, the name is what it displays all the time here, so exit for a second. Scene 1, tuner, tempo, etc. You're limited to 6 characters. Now, full name is what it displays momentarily when you press it, which you have a much longer option available. So if you notice, I have a space between scene and 1, just because I have that extra character to use. So anyway, back to this. So to edit it, hit D, and this sends up to 8 different messages at the same time. So you could get pretty creative with things. So if you wanted to turn on a drive block and a delay at the same time, you could configure message 1 to be delay on and off, and message 2 to be drive on and off. If you wanted to alternate between two blocks to turn one on and one off, you could do the same thing and just flip the 0 and 127s. So anyway, I had this set up for scenes. So if I scroll over, so this is a continuous message, or sorry, CC message with the value over here of 34.0. 34 is scene change in the Xfx, 0 is scene 1, 1 is scene 2, and so on. So the numbers are off by 1. So whatever scene you want, -1, and that's your scene. And then this you don't need for scene changes, but we'll use this later for turning blocks on and off. And channel 1, by default, everything's channel 1 on the Xfx, so you're probably not going to be changing that. This would be for, say, if you had another device plugged in, like that accepts MIDI and like a delay pedal or something, and then or if an amp that has MIDI channel switching, you could set this to be a different channel. So that way, channel 1 would be Xfx, channel 2 would be some other device, and so on. So, but if you have that complicated of a setup, you probably already know that, so I don't need to be explaining that. Anyway, so here are the different types of messages. So this is a CC message. We have a patch change toggle, so you can go back and forth between two different patches. CC toggle, which is what we'll use to turn blocks on and off. Patch change toggle hold, so that means when you hold the button down, it'll switch to something else, and when you let go, it'll switch back. So say you're on patch 1, hold it down, it'll switch to, say, patch 10, and when you let go, it'll switch back to patch 1. Similar idea for CC toggle hold. So say if you had like a freeze or a stutter effect, you could hold it down and then let go and it'd stop. CC delay is same as a regular CC, except it doesn't send the signal right away. You can specify, I think you can specify how long there's a delay before the message actually gets sent out. Not something I use, and I'm not sure exactly what you'd use it for, but it's there if you want it. Note on and off, not applicable to the Xfx, but perhaps another device. This is the tap tempo, but I actually don't use this for tap tempo. When you set this to MIDI clock tap, when you, make sure that's the right one, I'm not confusing something else. Yes. There are quite a lot of things you can choose from here, as you can see, so let me scroll back to that. Alright, so when you hit that, it'll bring up like a sub menu that you then tap the tempo to what you want, and then when you exit, it'll then send that new tempo. I prefer it more the way the MSC does it, where the tap tempo button is always live, and every time you hit it, it sends a new thing to the Xfx. So this does work, but it's not really necessary for the way I like to use it, so I don't use this option. If you're using a Strymon, bank up, bank down, patch change scroll up, so this is +1. So if you're on patch 1, if you set a button to be this and you hit that button, it'll go to the next patch, patch 2, patch 3, etc. One of my banks I have scroll up and scroll down, and I'll show you that later. You can actually daisy chain multiple MC6s together, but this will change between banks within the MC6, as well as maybe other MC6s that are linked together. So this I don't use, but if you wanted to quickly switch over to a bank instead of doing the left-right thing that I showed earlier, then you could use that. You'd actually have a button to suddenly jump to another bank. Conditional, we'll get to that in a moment, but this is a pretty cool feature. It took me a while to figure out how it worked, but this, so hopefully this particular one will be helpful and to people watching this. But basically a conditional is, it allows you to have two different options for the same button. So say if you tap the button, it'll do one thing, but if you hold down the button, it'll do something else. So that's a pretty cool effect that I use quite a bit now that I've figured out how to use it. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. System real-time, not something you're probably going to use. Xfx Tuner, obviously if you're going to use the tuner, you have that, and then you have to set this to the correct MIDI number, which off the top of my head is like 14 or 15, I think it's 15. System exclusive message, probably something you're not going to use. Turning MIDI through on or off, again, probably something you're not going to use. Clear toggle, that's more advanced programming. That might actually be something I might need to use. I was running into an issue with something and might need to use that. Blink will affect the blinking of a preset, or of a a button's label. And set bank, select expression message, so you can actually change what the expression pedals do with this by pressing a button over here. Toggle page, so set toggle. Primes the device to send something very quickly, so if you have a very time-sensitive thing like using a looper, that can be useful. There's actually, this is one of the new things in the beta. And another new thing is looper mode, which is basically the same idea, but specifically for looping. So this is a nice addition. I was having trouble with getting this to sync up in time, so when I would do a loop, there'd always be a weird hiccup. Now that this is on here, everything works great. So this will, I'll show you this in a moment, but this is a very useful feature that was just added. Empty if you don't want it to do anything, and patch change, let's leave it back to where I started. So now keep in mind, there's 8 messages that can be sent per button. So you could have all those things I scrolled through, set up to different messages. So to save it, D and E, to exit without save, or exit E and F. So I don't need to save that, so I'm just going to exit, and then exit back to the main thing. All right, so I'm going to scroll over to another bank here. Show you how I've set up an effect. So for example, the multi-delay. So here's this, I'll turn the delay off, and turn the multi-delay on. Notice that now it's synced up, so when I hit it, it'll blink, and it's on. Okay, so since this is the last thing I selected, when I hit D and F, it's going to edit switch E, as it says. So to show you the message for that, so I have it set to CC toggle, which means that when you hit it once, it'll turn on, hit it twice, it'll turn off. Currently value 69, which is the multi-delay in the Xfx. And 0 meaning off, and same thing but 127 meaning on. So the first time you hit it, it's this, and then it'll toggle back and forth between these two messages, so on or off, on, etc. Now that's all I have set up for this one, but back up here. Let's look at the delay here. So the delay, there we go. The delay in the Xfx has an XY state. And something I think is a really cool feature is that if I just press this, it'll turn the delay on and off. But if I hold it down for more than 600 milliseconds, it'll switch between the X and Y states. That's a pretty subtle effect. I have 2 delays that sound almost exactly the same, so maybe that's not the best example. But how about the drive block? I believe I have the new Timmy pedal, and if I hold it down, it's the, what did I set that other one to? One of the other drive blocks, regardless. So now I can toggle between X and Y states. Really cool feature. Gives you a lot more flexibility. As far as I know, this is the only expression pedal or foot controller that does that. So to program this is going to use that conditional that I was mentioning earlier. And it took me a while to figure out how to get this to work. But so we're going to use 4 different messages. So message 1 is going to be set to conditional. So right off the bat, we're programming it to do different things. So type 2, value 2 sends an if or statement. Basically it means that if you, with value 2 set down, it means that if you press it, it'll just do everything up to a placeholder that you set as one of the messages. And if you hold it down, it'll do everything after the placeholder. So basically, what I was mentioning earlier, press the button, it does one thing, hold it down, it does something else. So in order to get a button to do that, make your first message conditional, set it to 2-2, and this is blank. Now to go to second message, this is just our basic drive on and off. Same as we'd normally do if that's all we were doing. This would normally have been message 1. Message 3 is conditional 00, which is the placeholder. So this is the bookmark that when you hold it down, it jumps to. So when you tap it, let me back up here. When you tap the button, because of this if or if else statement, if you tap it, it'll do everything up to the bookmark, the placeholder, And if you hold it, it'll do everything after this one. So message 4 onward, message 4 to 8, which 5 through 8 is blank, so nothing's happening. It's basically just sending message 4. So message 4 I also have set to be a toggle, because I'm toggling between X and Y states. So now it's set to 108. Still 0 and 127. 108 is the XY state for drive 1. So that is a really cool feature. You can toggle between X and Y as well as turn things on and off. So that's really great. I like that a lot. Looper mode. So as I said, there's this new looper mode. I also set up a double feature for this one because I already used all 5 buttons, or sorry, all 6 buttons, and I wanted to figure out where I could place this new looper mode. And I realized, I don't really use reverse that much, so I'll just duplicate this. So if I tap it, it'll engage reverse, but if I hold it down, looper mode, and you can set it on or off. So basically what this does is it makes the buttons like hypersensitive. So if you just lightly tap it, it'll instantly send the signal out. Because of that, it's really hard to change banks because as soon as you press a button, if you basically don't hit them perfectly together, it won't work. Which is the whole point of looper mode, is that it's supposed to make everything happen as soon as you press the button, very instantaneous. So if I need to change another bank, I'll have to exit looper mode first, and then I can change banks. So I set this up the same way, DNF to enter it. So the message is a conditional one with 2-2, meaning that it's going to do 2 different things when you tap it or hold it. And then, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Message 2 is, this is the reverse mode toggle, and then here's the placeholder, and then looper mode, which doesn't have anything you have to configure. Everything's just set to 0. All you have to do is just set this message to be looper mode. That's it. Okay, exit that. So these other ones are just set to the regular MIDI values of dub, record, etc. If you don't know which ones are which, if you hit the I/O button on the Xfx and page over a couple of times, there's everything listed as which MIDI number does what. You can even change them if you want. So the once and undo I programmed a little different because once isn't an on-off button. Same thing with undo. It's just you hit it and it works, and that's it. So because of that, let me edit that one. It is not a toggle, but rather just a CC message. And I duplicated the same value for both. So this one, otherwise if you're doing a toggle, it's only going to work every other time, which is not what that feature works like. So undo and once are just simple CC messages, whereas play, record, dub, which are on-off options, are toggles instead. Here's the patch increase and decrease. So if I hit this, I am now on patch 2, which is a Morgan AC20 patch. And then here's back to my Fender patch. To show you how that works, show you the message. So this is a patch change scroll down, the other one's patch change scroll up, and you can jump by different amounts actually. So 1 just causes the jump by 1, and if you set at different numbers, it would jump by 5s or whatever, kind of like how on the Xfx when you can jump by 5 presets at a time. So that might be kind of useful if, say, if you had a dedicated bank on here to be, say, patches 1, 2, 3, 4, and when you hit this, say you increase it by 4, it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the numbers aren't going to change. This is just you name it and then it's set. But if you can keep track of where you're at, then that could be a useful thing for scrolling around between patches with your feet. And then, let's see, this one I have set up another cool option. So this is XY for amp and cab. So I have like a deluxe reverb with a deluxe reverb for the amp and cab, and then I believe on my first preset, which I think I accidentally changed, jump it back here. There we go. So if I hit this, it'll go from that Fender, there we go, to the Euro Red, and then some 4x12 I have assigned to it. So in order to change both at the same time, I have message 1 is a toggle for the amp, which is 100. Message 2 is a toggle for the cab, 102. Amp 1, cab 1. So it sends out both at the same time. So this isn't one where it does one thing if you hold the button down, one thing if you tap the button, so there's no conditional things programs. It's just simply doing two things at once, so changing two blocks at the same time. So that's pretty cool. Now another cool thing, let's talk about the expression pedals for a moment. So right now I have this one, actually let's talk about how to program them. So just like with the buttons, in order to program one of these, it'll program whichever one you moved the last. So I'm going to move this one just to engage that. Now, to reference my handy notes here, pedal edit is A and C together, so A and C. Okay, so you can calibrate on here. Hit heel down, next, toe down, next, calibration complete. Display, you can have it display what the value is on. Not something I really need, so I'm going to hit no. Sensitivity, you can, again, adjust the sensitivity of it. Let's edit it. So this works exactly the same as the buttons do. You can clear, copy, etc. like that. And message 1, type expression, and the value is 16. 16 on the Xfx by default is the external 1, and 0 to 127 are the values. I guess if you wanted to decrease it and only let it go up to 120, you could, or whatever. If you flipped them, then you'd invert the pedal. Now, here's a really cool thing about the way this works that I didn't realize at first, and got me a little confused why my pedals weren't always working. So each one of these banks, let me be back here. So here's bank 4, there's bank 3, etc. Can have, just like you can program the switches to do something different in every bank, you can actually program the expression pedals to do something different. Another feature I've never seen in a foot controller, usually this is always hardwired to one thing, and this is always hardwired to one thing that you program it to be, and it's the same always. But this one, it's different every single bank. So that means that you need to copy and paste these to every bank if you want them to be the same. If you don't do that, then they won't be calibrated and suddenly your pedal won't be working. That was the problem I was running into. It worked fine on the first bank that I calibrated it on, and as soon as I paged over to bank 2, my pedals didn't work. And I realized, oh, that's why. So, but the really cool thing is, and I use this quite a bit actually, another way to pack a lot of power in a very small footprint here. So this right now is programmed to be expression 1, which I always set up on my patches to be a volume. And this is set up to be expression 2, which if my patch has a wah, is a wah with an auto engage. But what if my patch also has, say, oops, the tuner mode, a rotary, and I want to control the speed? Well, I can't use this because that's my volume, and I can't use this because it's going to be turning my wah on and off, and I'm out of expression pedals. Well, when I'm on this bank, I've changed this to be expression 3. So now, instead of controlling expression 2, which would be my wah, it's controlling, I've assigned expression 3 to control the rotary speed. Likewise, if I scroll over to another one, I have a pitch block, which I've set to be like the classic Digitech whammy pedal. And I've, in this one, set this to be expression pedal 4. So now, this will adjust that, and it won't affect my Leslie speed, it won't engage my wah. So in order to use that, I've set it so if I'm on anything that doesn't have a Leslie or a pitch, it's always going to be 2. So all I have to do is scroll over to something like this that doesn't have a rotary or a pitch, and suddenly it's back to being wah again. So that is a really, really cool feature. So the Xfx has up to 8 external expression pedal MIDI numbers, but even the MFC only has 4 inputs. So here's a great way to get 8 different pedals with only 2, or you could even do it with just 1. So that is a really awesome feature. That has been solved problems that I thought couldn't be solved for me. So that, and all in this tiny little footprint that barely takes up any stage space at all. So I believe that's everything I wanted to go over with this. So it takes a little getting used to with programming this, mainly because it can do so much. You have to just get used to what you can do with it. So, but great little device, very tiny. This is a Pedal Train Nano that I have this attached to, which is exactly the right size for a Roland DV5. Plenty of room on either side of this. So great little device. Retails for a little more than 200 US. I think it's 229 maybe. And the firmware is always being updated, just like with the Xfx. You update it very similar to the Xfx, actually. You hook up to your computer via USB, and just like the FractalBot program that you upload the patch, the firmware with, there's a little MC6 program you download that will also upload the firmware. There's an editor program, kind of like AxeEdit, and there's also a backup program, so you can download all of your settings for backup. So really excellent little box that does so many things. In fact, I'm actually getting rid of my MFC because this does everything my MFC does in like a quarter of the space. So fantastic little device. I love this thing very much. Hope you enjoy it, and hope this clears up how to use some of the cool features with this. And thank you. Sorry, one thing I forgot. So if you have an RAC12, like I do in my Xfx, I had a bit of a weird time figuring out how to get everything to play together nicely. So I stumbled across, totally by accident, this really weird way that makes it work, but it always works. So in case you also have an RAC12, here's how I have everything set up that makes it work. So I've got the MIDI in and out cables going into a patch bay over here. And on the other side of this patch bay is a special Y cable made for me by Bestronix that goes into the back of the RAC12. So it's like a bidirectional single MIDI cable on one side, splitting on the Y side of it to two standard 5-pin MIDI cables. Then the RAC12 is hooked up the standard way with a bidirectional MIDI cable to the back of the Xfx. Now the problem I was having was that if the RAC12 wasn't in the chain, it worked just fine. But as soon as the RAC12 wasn't there, it seemed to sort of not pass the MIDI messages from the MC6 to the Xfx. However, messages from the Xfx would travel just fine to the MC6. So for example, if I was on the tuner screen, this wouldn't engage the tuner, but if I manually turned it on here, it would send the tuner data to the MC6. So I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. I tried all these different combinations and nothing worked. And I'd completely stumbled across this by accident, but I discovered when you power on the Xfx and the MC6, so I've got both set up to the same power things, I just turn this and it flips on. So while the Xfx is booting up in the splash screen, but before it reaches this preset scene, I have to engage the tuner and wait. Then when the Xfx reaches the preset screen, the tuner will flip on. Then exit tuner mode, and then everything works. I don't know why that works, but it does. It works every time. So basically I have to make sure I boot things in sequence. I turn this on first, then I turn on the Xfx and the RAC12. While this is booting up the splash screen, engage the tuner, wait for it to reach the preset, and then have the tuner display, and then exit the tuner, and everything's happy. So if you also have an RAC12 and you're having a hell of a time getting the connectivity to work, try that. Hopefully that works for you too. Like I said, complete accident, I stumbled across that, but it works, and it works every time. So cross my fingers, it'll continue to work forever. So hope that's helpful to you. Thanks.